Robin Sharma, thank you so much for coming to the Aldar Experts. You're such a great pleasure to have with us today.
Thank you, Cecilia. It was a pleasure to be in the room with all of the brokers and to talk about leadership and elite performance.
Thank you. So for the people who probably one person in the world who doesn't know you, can you give me a little background to how did you get here?
Sure. I grew up in a small town. I went to law school, and I was really very focused on being a litigation lawyer. Became a litigation lawyer at a big firm. Long story short, I didn't really love my life. I decided to make some changes, so I was happier and more present and more peaceful and more creatively fulfilled. So that was like a 2-year period of a lot of transformation where I explored many different methodologies, from journaling to meditation to talking with elders. And after the 2 years, I really noticed so many positive changes. So I decided to share what I learned in a book called The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari. I self-published it, started off from very humble beginnings. The book became a global bestseller, and it led me down a whole new road where I teach leadership and what I teach. And this is year 27 in the field.
Wow, that's amazing. Today, you talk a lot about leadership, about how to win, how to have strategies from mindset all the way to small things you can do every day to really change the perspective in your life. Let's talk a little bit about consistency. How do you break down consistency? Because it's a very simple word, but at the same time, it's quite difficult to implement. What's the trick?
There's no tricks. Consistency is a practice. And it's like playing cricket or chess. The more you practice it, the better you get. The human being, everyone watching, everyone listening, we all have the same gift. And it's the gift of a human brain that has an ability called neuroplasticity. And if we do one thing over and over, through the experience of practice, it wires in neural circuits, and if we continue to practice the same thing, the neural circuits get stronger, and then a fatty tissue called myelin starts to wrap around it, and we develop this advanced perception that you see the great athletes, for example, showing. So there's no tricks, there's no magic. It's just you pick something. Maybe it's getting up and joining the 5 a.m. club and spending an hour developing yourself. Maybe it's the practice of adding unexpected value to customers consistently. But the more you do it, the easier it gets. It's almost like, if I was to think of a metaphor, Cecilia, it would be the first time you try anything new. I shared hundreds of ideas today. So the first time you try one of the new ideas, it's like you're walking down a grassy meadow. The next month you continue to do it every day. The meadow becomes a trail. You do it for another 6 months. What happens? Through the practice, it's like the trail becomes a road. The road eventually becomes a highway, and eventually becomes a superhighway. Like, all geniuses have one thing in common. They just do one thing really, really well for an extended period of time. So consistency is how you get there. And there is no trick. You just have the passion. I talked in the presentation about Wayne Gretzky, and from 2 to 39, age 39 when he retired. All he did was hockey, but he loved it. And that speaks to the importance of finding ways to love what you do. So when you're doing the practice, it actually brings you joy.
Amazing. And one of the things that you talk about customer centricity, and you're talking about, you actually did quite an interesting example that, the customer is in front of you and you are on your phone. How do you create a 10x environment? How do you actually focus yourself in creating that experience with the customer?
It's a great question. So the concept I taught was the 10x value obsession. Yeah. The marketplace rewards magic delivered. And very few people in your industry, in any industry, very few people are merchants of wow. We want the rewards of world class, but we're not doing the things that world class requires. One of the things the majority doesn't do is be present in front of a customer. The phone rings, it's, excuse me. Well, that's disrespectful. And it shows you're not really committed to the relationship. Sometimes we show up at a meeting with a client, we're underprepared, not even prepared, baseline prepared, we're underprepared. Sometimes we're in front of a customer, we don't have deep domain knowledge. Why? Because we're too busy being busy versus spending an hour every day, deep focus on understanding the product. So how do you add 10x value? There's a number of things you can do to add 10x value to a customer. And when you add 10 times the value that the customer is expecting, you create a fanatical follower because you stand out versus fit in. And that person not only has loyalty to you and buys from you, but they become your word of mouth evangelists. So what are some ways to add more value? I mentioned them. First of all, be an amazing listener. I don't see many salespeople who are great listeners. Secondly, know more about your product than anyone else in the field who knows about your product. Number 3, be a great communicator. How many times do you get someone's email? You don't understand what they're saying. They haven't listened to you. 4th thing I'd say is an obsessive attention to the details. Too many people are sloppy. They forget this. Oh, I forgot that. I didn't send you the right contract. I need to do this. Have strong systems and be meticulous. And then I could go on and on, but I'd also say manage your own enthusiasm, and not in a fake way, but when you're in front of the customer, have that sparkle in your eye. Have your morning workout so you're fit and energetic, and actually develop the character strength so when you're with that person, you're actually happy to be with them.
And enroll them in your service, in your product.
Well, service is the key. I mean, it sounds like a simple idea, but it's really not. It's believing in your product and then from a very visceral level, trying to serve someone. When I write my books, the last book, The Everyday Hero Manifesto, I wrote it over 16 months in the pandemic. Cecilia, I rewrote it maybe 20 to 30 times. Every line I sweat over, every model in there, I just rewrote the book over and over and over. And that's because, I had an opportunity to bring rich value to my readers, and I wanted to do it. It meant a lot to me. So, seeing yourself as an instrument of service, I think people feel your commitment.
Absolutely. Now, if you go back to what we're doing today, we're educating real estate brokers, people who are living paycheck to paycheck. They don't know what's going to happen at the end of the month. What will be your key advice for somebody starting an industry that is not safe, it's not secure, requires a lot of hours, commitment?
Again, a great question. I think it's very crowded on the first mile, and there's very little competition on the extra mile. There's very little competition in the rare air of world class. So most people, they don't really study their craft. They don't really study communication. They don't manage themselves. They don't have a daily schedule. They don't have a mentor. They don't study their heroes and their icons. They don't practice, along with all the responsibilities that they have. And then they wonder why they're not getting peak results. Well, they're not doing the things that peak results require. So, you say, well, they're living paycheck to paycheck. I would say, people who are indispensable to their customers have a very long and successful career. So you want to, Steve Martin, the great Hollywood comedian, a young comedian asked him, how can I be the next Hollywood legend? And he said, be so good at what you do that they can't ignore you. And so I would say my humble advice to any real estate broker would be so good at what you do that you're the only one in your domain who can do what you do. Listen as well. Be as presentable. Be as excellent. Know the right properties. Be as responsive, be as helpful, be as passionate, be as honest. All those things, like you said, they seem simple, but they're actually practiced in the breach. Why? Because we're so busy being busy. Absolutely. That we don't stop and we don't install these habits. And genius is less about genetics and more about habits. So.
And another important point that you brought in the conversation was likability.
Yes.
Now, sales is a game of asking. Not necessarily people will like you in the first moment because they know you want something out of that relationship. So how do you balance that?
Well, I think someone has that feeling you spoke of. Oh, she wants something, he wants something. They only feel like that if you're not sincere. Again, I think if you're coming from a place of service, that's why it's important to work on yourself.
Now, and it's such an important big word, service, right? How do you introduce and how do you become truthful about what service is?
Well, prayer. You know, prayer is powerful. If you pray to your higher power, whatever your higher power looks like, you pray for service. You pray for the ability to be helpful. Number two, you read books of the great women and men of the world. Philosophy is important for sales success. You know, when you read philosophy, it's such a paradox. When you serve, you actually find happiness.
Absolutely.
I haven't found happiness from material things. They bring pleasure, but they're fleeting. Let's go to the science. Any positive psychologist will talk about a term called hedonic adaptation. Hedonic adaptation explains why you get a beautiful new car and you're happy for 2 weeks. And after that, what do you want?
Something else.
Something else.
Yep.
Human beings adapt. So nothing on the outside will ever bring you sustained happiness. I'm talking about FFA, fame, fortune, and applause. Never brings happiness. What brings happiness is doing great work, having a great family life, enjoying the process of life, and knowing that you are using whatever days you have left on the planet to make people's lives better. So it's such a paradox. The more you serve, the happier you get. But to go back to your question, because it was so important, if someone says, oh, what do they want from me? I would say that salesperson is giving off a vibe through their energy, through their body language, through their through their words, which is causing that person not to trust them. But if you have worked on yourself, if you're prepared, you're coming from a place of helpfulness, you go, here are the properties, I've listened to you, I know your needs, this is the right place, then they start to slowly take down their armor and they start to trust you. That's why I talked about being early, not late, keeping your promises. All those kinds of things build trust. And people do business with people they like, with people they trust, with people who make them feel special.
And to close today, Robin, why do you think people cannot commit to those objectives? We had a lot of our brokers asking questions about, I'm not sure if I can wake up early in the morning, I'm going to bed late. And you have different perspectives of the reasons why I cannot achieve those objectives that are basic, right, to make you successful. Why do you think is holding people back?
Well, excuses. We make excuses, and excuses are liars and fears are thieves. And to get a little psychological, underneath an excuse lives a fear. So most people have programming that they're not aware of, subconscious programming. Their parents, teachers, society has taught them. Don't ask for the order. If you make this much money, you'll lose it. Rejection is bad, etc., etc. And so we actually deceive ourselves and we say, I'm not the kind of person who can install that habit. I'm not the kind of person who could be the leader of my field. And then we make up excuses to cause us not to have any personal responsibility. I think ultimately we say I can't do it because we're scared. Because they're spending their 24 hours in a day doing something, but often they're busy being busy versus being monomaniacally focused on the activities that would allow them to rise to world class.
So it's accountability. People should be held accountable by themselves.
It depends. The interesting thing is, the consistent doing of difficult things makes an easy life. It's the people who don't have the right habits, who are just busy, who are complaining, who are always running around like their lives are a 5-alarm fire. They're the people under stress. And the people who have great habits and the people who are scheduled and planned and methodical and they study and they follow these values of truthfulness, excellence, honesty, persistence, those people do difficult things, but those things become easy, but also their life becomes much easier.
Robin, it was a great time to speak. Thank you so much for coming. We had really an amazing time, and I think everybody took a lot of lessons from today. So I hope to see you again at Aldar Experts. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Cecilia. It was great to be at Aldar Experts, and I appreciate the invitation.
Thank you. See you soon.